of marriage and the sacrament of matrimony. It's a disgrace, and our hope is, through prayer, that the Catholic Church will come to recognize what it is doing to this great institution of marriage. Thank you.
Thanks, Alec. We'll begin now the third phase of the debate, the summation. We'll begin with the negative summation.
I think one of the things we've seen, certainly during the course of the presentations by the two gentlemen and myself, Ben and Tom, and that is perhaps it's highlighted the fact that the Church has its least developed theology in its theology of matrimony. Perhaps it really points to the fact that we need to spend much more time in the preparation and the formation of individuals for the reception of that sacrament, which we reference as being a way of standing as a visible sign of the presence of Christ in the Church. That if that is in fact the truth, and if we would spend 4 years to prepare individuals for the reception of the sacrament of holy orders, perhaps we need to consider such an extensive process for preparing individuals for the sacrament of matrimony. The fact that this Church continues as best she can as the visible sign of Christ's presence in the midst of a world that has become so technologically advanced, so confused in its modes and methods of communication, that we find individuals who make choices and attempt to join with others for whom and with whom they are not prepared to spend their lives, is certainly a sign that the Church needs to continue her process of analyzing whether or not commitments actually happened and or took place. Annulment is not Catholic divorce. Annulment is nowhere like divorce, since divorce is in and of itself an issue, again, of civil law and a question of inheritance and the sharing of property. Rather, we have many, many people, because of the complexities of their own lives, who have stayed in lousy, rotten, awful, disgusting, disreputable relationships, simply because they felt that that was some manner in which they were supposed to suffer through, all for the sake of the sacrament of matrimony. What we know, that in 99% of those cases, the individuals were not legitimately engaged in a covenant relation. Notably, the circumstances of alcoholism that are so rampant in the society, the realities of mental illness, and certainly the frank fact that we have in this society of addictive and addictions we need to deal with. When we address those concerns legitimately, when we are willing to say to our sons and daughters and the children that we form in our catechetical programs that if you are dating an alcoholic or a person who is in fact an addict of any type, you cannot assume that you will change them. And thus we should disallow any possibility of entering into a sacramental agreement, i.e. marriage. If we are honest about that, then we will certainly diminish the number of requests for annulments, and we will certainly diminish the number of requests for divorce. However, there are those extenuating circumstances where we did not know that our partner was in fact ill. And in those cases we are, I suspect very much so, like that of my parents, having recently buried my own mother, who was a paranoid schizophrenic, who at the time married my father not knowing of her illness and had not in fact manifested. And my father did in fact stand by, remain married to, in great fidelity and extraordinary love, a woman with whom he spent 29 years as a schizophrenic, who after 29 years of marriage, living together in the household, raising their 5 children, left him, and for the remaining 25 years, that is, they would have been married a total of 50 years at the time of her death, he continued to regard himself as married, faithful to her, and from a distance saw to her welfare and her care. They, in fact, entered into a legitimate covenant. Could my father live in that covenant with my mother, as ill as she was, and with her desire not to be a part of it? No. But he did regard that commitment legitimately. This Church does, in fact, regard marriage with esteem. But if we truly regard it by esteem, I don't think it's the issue of taking apart questions of papacy or councils, but it's a question of looking at whether or not we are truly prepared to form the young, address the questions, hit the issues head on, and help the laity live the life that really is a vocation, and not just something that anyone who's capable of engaging in any kind of sex act should regard as a way of joining together. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. And now we'll have the affirmative summation.
The question which this session is supposed to deal with is whether all the people whose annulments the Church grants were unmarried. It is no secret, it is national news that literally tens of thousands of annulments are given in this country every year. These annulments continue, and my question is, are the priests and the bishops happy that there are so many invalid marriages? Are they glad that they have found psychological devices whereby they can declare that people who have been married for years, who have had children, can be said never to have married each other? Are they glad that this condition prevails? The fact of the matter is that the Church presently has a different orientation from the true Catholic Church. The true Catholic Church is oriented toward God and His law and the true faith. The present Catholic Church is oriented toward human beings and pleasing human beings. It thinks that it is an act of charity to welcome everyone who has discontinued with his spouse or her spouse, and to exert great energy, great legalism, and verbosity, and all kinds of bureaucratic machinery to annul this marriage. We have to say that it is very glad to perform this service, because it performs this service so often, and it is very busy about this. In the old days, an annulment took years. Now it is a matter of weeks and months. There does not seem to be any sorrow over the condition of marriages